Hi there. My name's Jessie Mahoney. I am a board certified pediatrician, a yoga and mindfulness instructor, and a life coach who specializes in relationships. I'm also a mom of three sons who are now 24, 20, and almost 15, and have been married to my husband for 27 years. And I was asked to talk today about relationships, specifically difficult relationships. I'm not sure it's a good thing to be an expert in difficult relationships, but it is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about and helping people through. So I love to help people improve their difficult relationships, and because it changes their lives. And as I think about in this wellness summit, why would we want to have a session on difficult relationships? And the reason is that our relationships impact our lives so significantly. There's a Harvard study, a 75-year study, that actually showed that the quality of our relationships is one of the most important things to impact our health and happiness and longevity. So realizing that when our relationships are difficult, it's impacting all of these things is really strong incentive and impetus to do what we can to make them better. Most of the time, we want other people to change the relationships, and we want to fix them by other people changing. And what I wanted to offer today through coaching and mindset and mindfulness and intentional work is that the real work is done by each of us. When we show up and we are, as we like to say in coaching, the change that you want to be, that is when the relationship changes. And why would you do this and put your own self out when we so often want to be the victim and blame the other person? And the reason to do this is that it's something we can control. We can't control the other person. And all we can do is change how we show up for the relationship and see how it impacts the other person, the space and the energy in their lives and in our lives. So I would offer today, the first tip would be to be the change that you want to see. Decide that you're not going to be a victim and decide to show up and be the change that you hope to see in your life, in your family, in your world. So COVID has certainly made all of our relationships much more challenging, whether it's with our children, our teenagers, young adults, mothers, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, spouses, colleagues. I think everyone is noticing the cracks in these relationships. We're also noticing the importance of these relationships as we spend more time with people and as many of us really get in touch with what is important in our lives. So I wanted to offer this thought that even with COVID, even if you have a spouse with mental health issues, you have a mother-in-law who does what your mother-in-law does, a colleague who does what they do, you have a spouse who does what he does, teenagers who do what they do, perhaps you have someone in your family with ADHD or something like that, that it's possible even with those to transform these relationships from very challenging ones into much more amazing ones. So I think the truth is that difficult relationships are absolutely everywhere. But we get to decide how difficult they are. And by even calling them difficult relationships, that's the beginning of our story. And that's also the beginning of our power. It's the power to change the story. So I would offer that perhaps thinking about the relationship not as difficult, but either just as a relationship, or you could potentially even think about it as an amazing relationship. I was asked by a physician colleague and friend a while back whether my relationship was amazing. And this friend was struggling with some issues with her own spouse. And the question was, could you have an amazing relationship if your spouse had an underlying condition? Was it possible? And so I did a lot of soul searching around this concept of what makes an amazing relationship. And actually, I really looked at my own relationship. What makes an amazing relationship for me and my spouse? And did I have one after all these years? And what would that look like? And what I discovered was when I started focusing on what was amazing, it all became that much more amazing. And my relationship is no different than most of yours. In coaching, we say things are 50-50, so half good, half bad. So realizing that it's really the perspective and the mindset you bring to the 50-50, the half good and the half bad. So I offer to you, just thinking about that, how do you want to show up for your relationship? Can you show up for these difficult relationships from a place of love and compassion? One of the concepts that I love to offer to my coaching clients is this idea of what would love do in this situation? What would compassion do in this situation? And so when your toddler's having a temper tantrum, or your teen is acting in a certain way, or your spouse is doing something that perhaps you think they shouldn't, I like to put shoulds in quotes, what would love do in that situation? How would love show up? Because if the situation were reversed, you would want them to show up with love. And what I've discovered is that when we show up from a place of love and from a place of compassion, relationships are much better. We do this not to condone bad behavior or say that it's okay, but really for our own selves. The idea of all of this relationship work is to put on your own oxygen mask first. And when we do that, we create space for things to get better. So I offer to you also to think about, what would love do? What would compassion do? Another question that is very helpful is, what if the relationship is not hard? What if it's not difficult? Where is there abundance in your relationship? Looking at these things helps you see that relationship that may be difficult can actually feel much more amazing. And again, nothing has changed at that point, just your perspective on the relationship. So I wanted to offer a couple of approaches to difficult relationships that I think may help and serve you. I was going to start with a quote, which is, "You come to love not by finding the perfect person, but by learning to see an imperfect person perfectly." That was written by Sam Keen. And one of the key approaches that I like to use around difficult relationships and a way to help make them more amazing is to be intentional. So intention is something we use in yoga. And as a yoga instructor, I infuse yoga and mindfulness into my entire life. And yoga is life, and life is yoga, as we say in yoga. But you don't have to be a yogi to infuse yogic philosophy into your relationships and into your lives. And yoga is designed to bring more peace, more compassion, more acceptance. And specifically, we approach yoga from a place of intention. And I would encourage you to approach your relationship from a place of very specific intention. So choose to decide to have an amazing relationship, whether it's with your teen, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your mother-in-law, because why not? They're your teen, they're your spouse, they're your mother-in-law. And you can do it for you, even if you're not doing it for them. But do it just to make the world a better place and to make your experience of the current reality, whatever it might be, better. A second approach for intention is to want what you have. We so often want the things for a long time. Most of us wanted the spouse, we wanted the child, we wanted the mother-in-law. And now that we have them, we want something different, and we want people to behave differently and things to be different. And so accepting what you have is the first step, but actually choosing to want what you have can really change your experience. So I offer that as just something to try. You don't have to want everything you have, but what can you want? What of what you have did you want, and do you want? Looking for those things with intention can really change your experience. The other intentional approach is to tell a story that serves you. So often we tell stories about relationships. Just calling it a difficult relationship is an example that we're telling a story that the relationship is difficult. We often tell stories of victimhood in relationships, why we are a victim of the circumstances or an illness or a situation or bad behavior or ADHD, mental health, Asperger's, all kinds of things. So many of us feel like we're a victim of these things. But the truth is they are all actually neutral circumstances. And when you can see them as that and decide instead to not be a victim, but to just be in the relationship actually improves. And again, I would say it isn't about liking it. It's just about choosing what you have and accepting what you have, which is a very mindful practice. So all of this conversation is about approaching your relationship with mindfulness and creating space and being intentional. And all of that can transform what we would initially describe and often immediately go back to this concept of a difficult relationship and make it into something much more amazing. The other intention I would recommend you try is to bring curiosity to your relationship, to bring humor to your relationship, to bring honesty to your relationship, and to bring commitment. Just try them on. See which of those resonates, which of those feels comfortable for you, and which of them can you try, and see what happens when you do. So along with intention, the second approach that I would recommend is accepting and allowing. This also comes from my mindfulness and yogic training. And in that philosophy, we suggest that you accept and allow things exactly as they are, not to resist reality, not to want the world to be different, but to accept it exactly as it is in this moment, realizing that that is how it is in this moment. Again, you do not have to like it, but the thought is that you don't have to change it and you don't always have to fix it. And there's tremendous power in accepting it and allowing it exactly as it is. Accepting and allowing your partner exactly as they are, or your child exactly as they are. Sometimes I have 3 children and they can be completely different, and allowing them each to be their completely different human person exactly as they are. Quirks, idiosyncrasies, and amazing talents and beautiful things, all exactly as they are. So this concept that you just don't judge, because judgment actually doesn't serve them, and we often come to judge others from a place of judging ourselves. So if you happen to be a high-performing professional, we are experts at judging ourselves, and we often bring that to our relationships. And bringing that to your relationship makes the relationship much more difficult than it needs to be. And that's the offer with these approaches, is to not struggle unnecessarily. Make it as easy as possible. So from this place of accepting and allowing, we talk in coaching about dropping your manual. We all have a manual for those people that we love and people with whom we have relationships, any relationship, actually, even a colleague. And a manual is what we think that person should do, what our expectations are. What should a husband do? What should a father do? What should a colleague do? And when we sit down and think about it, these lists are usually extremely long. And most of the time, we haven't shared them with the other person. So I would suggest that, especially in a loving relationship, and especially one that is feeling challenged and you're struggling, to have as few expectations as possible. When everyone is allowed to show up for the relationship exactly as they are, things go much, much more smoothly. So definitely a few minimal requirements. Do no harm to one another. Mine includes loyalty and respect. I think we should keep those, and that's my opinion. And I would encourage you to keep whichever ones you feel really, really strongly about. But try to keep your manual to as few as possible, realizing that those people you're in relationships with also get to have a manual for you. And so the shorter your manual is, the shorter their manuals should be. And the shorter all of our manuals are for one another, the better, more free life we have. And it leads to a lot more happiness and wellness. And so I would offer that you should choose your partner exactly how they are in the moment, whatever that is, the good, the bad, the idiosyncrasies, the beautiful. And when you let them be themselves, they often shine and show up in a different way. And you also get to be yourself, authentically and vulnerably you. And I believe that when we each show up authentically ourselves, that's when the relationship has the space to bloom. If you think about spaces, and often this comes up at work, where there's so many expectations on us that we feel like we just can't be. And in a relationship, when you take out those expectations and get them down to the absolute bare minimum, then you can actually start to breathe and start to be and see who you are and see who your partner is. And for many of us in these difficult relationships with children and busy jobs and busy lives, and now add to that a pandemic and homeschooling, we have not allowed space for that. And that's one of the reasons that there's so much pressure coming from above, getting in the way. So I offer this idea that if you let your partner and others be, your mother-in-law show up exactly how she is, that offers you the opportunity to show up exactly how you are. And from my point of view, that changes everything for the better for everyone. You can enjoy each other, and you can begin to notice and appreciate one another. So no one is perfect. We're not perfect. Our partners are not perfect. And so I offer this idea that we're all imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect, and realizing that, which comes again from this mindfulness, is a form of compassion and a form of acceptance. And when we can show up that way for these difficult relationships, things get infinitely better. I would also like to offer, from the yogic and mindfulness perspective, that all of this is a practice. So we try it, and some days we do a great job, and some days we don't do a great job. And so grace and compassion is one of my go-tos in relationships. Grace and compassion for you, grace and compassion for everyone else. For your children if they're having a difficult day, for your spouse if they're having a difficult day, for your colleagues, if you are in healthcare, for your patients. There's so many opportunities to just show up with grace and compassion. And when we show up that way, rather than from a place of judgment, life is so much more easeful for everyone around us. So remembering that they are a practice, and as they are a practice, it's just like a lifestyle. So it's like switching to plant-based eating or switching to a regular exercise habit. It takes practice, it takes time, and we don't always get it right. So forgiving yourself and giving yourself grace and compassion can make a huge, huge difference. I wanted to end with a mindful reflection. The thought here is that just as you are perfectly imperfect, so is everyone else. Just as you can build compassion and acceptance for yourself by focusing on all that you are, rather than what you are not, you can also do this for those that you love by focusing on all that they are instead of all that they are not. What is one thing you love about a person whom you love, yet also struggle with? What is one thing about this person that you would not change? How can you show up for this person with love? Can you show up for your relationship with kindness and curiosity without judgment? Can you show up with compassion for yourself and compassion for them? Can you notice, learn, allow, and unblock? Can you let criticism go? What is your intention? I encourage you to take a moment and decide what your intention in your difficult relationships are. Can you change the story? Can you tell a story that serves you? Can you transform your relationship from a difficult one to a more amazing one, just by choosing with intention how you want to show up? Hopefully those comments were helpful to some of you. I love coaching on relationships, and this is just a small bit of ways that you can approach challenging relationships to change your life. And from my own personal experience, when you're struggling in relationships, relationships can truly impact everything else in your life. They impact your health, your eating, your sleep, your level of stress, how you show up for work, how you show up as a parent, the experience of the weather, even. So, getting back to the Harvard study I mentioned in the beginning, knowing that relationships are key to living a long and healthy life, I encourage you to do the work starting now. But start with the work on you. That's what you can control. That's how you can be in the driver's seat of your life, your health, and your relationships. And often, when we are the change that we want to see, it creates space for others to shine and rise up and show up in the way that they would like to for the relationship. So I encourage you to try it. And please reach out if you have any questions at all. You can find me at Pause and Presence Coaching. It's www.jessiemahoney.com, JessiemahoneyMD.com. And I do one-on-one relationship coaching. I have group coaching programs on relationships, and I would love to work with any and all of you if you feel that it would be helpful. It's incredibly powerful to do this work in your role as a parent, in your role as a spouse. And what you may discover is when you change the way you approach relationships, it changes the way you approach everything in your life. It creates so much more space to breathe deeply and enjoy. Thanks so much for listening. May you all be well. Namaste.